Welcome back to Arcanum Theurgy. A little bit of a different intro there. That is Mau Pe Na, but that is in honor of our 10th episode, so we wanted to switch it up a little bit.
Very special episode. Number 10. We got 10 in the bag now.
Yeah, so with that being said, we would like to first thank Brady Peniton. I do believe that's how it's pronounced. We made a Patreon not too long ago, and when we did that, he was the first one to subscribe. And we really appreciate that. He left us some nice comments as well as something that he worked on in school. But, I digress. We really appreciate that, Brady. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And, even in private, I've told Dan, it's going to be crazy. Even if you get, $1 from somebody for doing it, that just feels cool because you're just doing this. It's like an artist selling their first painting, not to, make it out bigger. But it's like that type of thing. It just feels good.
It's like you make your first dollar. But
exactly, yeah. And we've just been getting mostly positive feedback on everything, which is again really cool. Been talking with people on Reddit. They've been giving me a lot of cool information, helping us out to understand things that maybe we didn't get just quite right. Suggesting other materials, which is very helpful and very cool. And
which Brady also did do. He helped me with the crone.
The crone,
yes, and all of that. So again, thank you to everyone who did that. So yeah, this is episode 10 on numbers. We're going to be talking about all kinds of numbers here. So Joe, if you want to start us off.
Sure, and you're Dan Rasanowski.
And I'm Dan Rasanowski.
That's right. All right. Yeah, I'm Joe Schaefer, here to talk about numbers. Some important numbers, some key numbers. I'm mostly going to focus on 7 and 40. And then Dan's going to go over just a few other ones. So I want to talk about a couple of important numbers in alchemy, or numbers that I encounter a lot in my readings. This should basically just serve as a good intro into the depths of numbers, just as being more than just, 2 of an item, blah, 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 et cetera, and simply just hopefully have some information here that can fill in any cracks of someone else's research, or just maybe be a jumping point, oh, that's interesting, blah, 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 didn't know that. So let's just get right into it. For his entry on numbers in his Dictionary of Symbols, Serlo writes that, quote, in symbolism, numbers are not merely the expressions of quantities, but idea forces, each with a particular character of its own. The actual digits are, as it were, only the outer garments, unquote. We can see how numbers would be of importance in alchemy when we read something like the following, also from Serlo in his passage. Quote, the idea that 1 engenders 2 and 2 creates 3 is founded upon the premise that every entity tends to surpass its limits or to confront itself with its opposite. Where there are 2 elements, the third appears as the union of the first 2 and then as 3, in turn giving rise to the 4th number and the link between the 3, and so on, unquote. So we have progression, as in progressing through the stages, moving from one to the next, growing, multiplicity coming through, multiplicity coming out of unity and returning back to a unity, kind of like an Ouroboros and an eternal recurrence. Also opposites combining and transforming, like the conjunctio and the hermaphrodite, which comes up in alchemy. So we've already talked about the numbers 3 and 4 in previous episodes. If we've mentioned more about them, that's fine, but I'm just for my little thing here on this side. We talked about 3 and 4 briefly in 4 in the Cross and Elements episode, which I think was episode 4 too.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool. As well as our episode on planets, I talked a little bit about it. 3 a little bit in that episode as well, and 7 a little bit too. But I want to talk a little bit more about 7 here, and also mention another number that I find popping up often that interests me, 40. 7. I'm sorry, hang on, I'm repeating that. So since I began with Serlo, let's start off with him again and see what he says on the number 7. He writes that 7 is, quote, symbolic of perfect order, a complete period or cycle. It comprises the union of the ternary and the quaternary, and hence is endowed with exceptional value, unquote. He also notes that 7 corresponds with the reconciliation of the square with the triangle by superimposing the triangle over the square, or by inscribing the triangle inside the square, and that it is a number of the basic series of musical notes, of colors, as well as the planetary spheres and gods corresponding to them. That's what we talked about in our planets episode. So, Pernetti has an entry for number 7 in his Mytho-Hermetic Dictionary, and he tells us that, quote, the philosophers speak of this mysterious number often. They have 7 planets, 7 kingdoms, 7 operations, 7 circles, 7 metals, and they say that their work resembles the creation of the world, which took place in 7 days, unquote. He picks this up later, saying, quote, but all of these 7 circles, kingdoms, operations are but one continual operation, to cook the matter in the kiln through the regimen of fire, according to the rules of the art, unquote. He points out that in this same operation, one goes through putrefaction, solution, distillation, sublimation, calcination, circulation, and incineration, 7 in total. He writes that some add coagulation and fixation, but omit distillation and circulation. He also, being Pernetti, informs us that Flamel explains the 7 words of the philosophers in 7 chapters in his treatise, and that Paracelsus says that there are 7 planets in fire, 7 metals in water, 7 herbs in earth, and 7 terreniabin in air. Probably, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but anyways, and 7 principal members of the human body. By terreniabin, he means manna, which the ancients called threr, or trer, Threr. 7 is also important in another tradition. It comes up in the Bible, with many things occurring 7 times, or there being 7 of a certain object, and even the division of 7 into 4 and 3 is mentioned in E.W. Bullinger's book, Number in Scripture. He notes that this division is especially notable in the Apocalypse, and again, that's what we talked about too, like the 4 in man with the elements, the 3 with like this, salt, mercury, and sulfur, and that being combined and reconciled to 7, like a completion, that type of thing. Okay. I may have been like pretty quick in that, so maybe that's a little wrong in my explanation, but it is also in this book, Numbers in Scripture, that we learn, quote, in Hebrew, 7 is Shevah, S-H-E-V-A-H. It is from the root Sava, S-A-V-A-H, to be fulfilled or satisfied, have enough of, unquote. Bullinger continues, quote, hence the meaning of the word 7 is dominated by this root, for on the 7th day God rested from the work of creation. It was full and complete and good and perfect. Nothing could be added to it or taken from it without marring it, unquote. For Bullinger, from his book, here's some interesting 7s. There's 7 miracles in John's Gospel, 7 appearances of angels during the life of Jesus on earth, 7 things that spiritually defile, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and many, many other things. But one that I found really interesting was that there are 7 different words for gold to be found in the Bible. I'm not going to list them. They're mostly like variants of Hebrew words and stuff. But again, this is all just from E.W. Bullinger's book, Number in Scripture. And of this, and this, where he points out that there are 7 different words for gold, he writes, quote, as brass is symbolical of judgment, seen in the brazen altar, so gold is symbolical of glory, and glory is grace consummated. Hence, the number of spiritual perfection in the words used for gold, unquote. Interesting connection there. Another number that has popped up here and there and interested me was 40. Evola, writing about mortification in the royal art and the symbol of the desert in the Hermetic tradition, makes reference to the, quote, 40 days of Jesus' retreat, unquote, and a retreat of Moses, also of 40 days, which leads him across a desert to a fountain in which he quenches his thirst. He also writes, quote, the number 40 reminds us also of the number of hours that Jesus lay in the sepulchre, and that in the calendar of Catholic feast days after Carnival follows Ash Wednesday, and a period of mortifications for 40 days, culminating in Easter with the resurrection, unquote. So you see the thing going from like, where was it? Carnival to Ash Wednesday, and from the mortifications of 40 days to the resurrection. So like this sort of phases going in this rebirth and whatnot. Process, yeah. 40 days also comes up again in the introduction to The Alchemy Reader when Stanton J. Linden quotes Ashmole saying, quote, as nature in her work below used 2 hot workmen, so will I. And because we cannot tarry her leisure, and long time she taketh to that purpose, we will match to count and countervail her little heats with proportions answerable and meet of our time, that we may do that in 40 days, which she doth in as many years, unquote. Also in chapter 44 of Roger Bacon's Radix Mundi, we read the following, quote, and in about the space of 40 days the superficies or upper part of the medicine will appear black as melted pitch, and this is the sign that the citrine body is truly converted into mercury, unquote. So returning to Bullinger's number in Scripture, we read, quote, 40 has long been universally recognized as an important number, both on account of the frequency of its occurrence and the uniformity of its association with a period of probation, trial, and chastisement, not judgment like the number 9, unquote. He also notes that it is the product of 8 and 5, so 8 times 5, interestingly enough, and there are 8 periods of 40 days mentioned in the Bible, similar to the examples given by Evola. Just another little interesting thing there. So that about wraps it up for me, but then we can go to Dan.
Yeah, so a lot of similar stuff, like a lot of biblical stuff comes up when you talk about these numbers, especially, 7 and stuff like that. I just want to say that this might get a little confusing because on this end there was a lot of just there's just numbers everywhere. It's 3 here times 11 plus 666 plus, and it's like,
I want to say in that Grimorium Verum, isn't there just a bunch of charts of numbers being multiplied?
Yeah, and that's what they do.
I can't remember what book I was looking through lately. I think it was that one where there was a bunch of that.
There's that chart. I think I was showing Bass got the German on it.
Okay.
Or something like that. Anyways, the most sacred numbers in the occult are 3, 6, 9, 11, and 13, and the multiples thereof. So, especially 22, 33, 44, 55, so on and so forth. And then the triplication of these numbers is even more important, such as 111, 222, 333, and so on. Mm. And there really isn't a difference between the single digits, the double digits, or the triple digits. It's only when they're doing a quote-unquote ritual, such as in Masonry and stuff like that, it's just supposed to amplify the desired effect.
Okay.
So it's not 333 means something specifically. It's just let's kick it up a
ramping
notch.
Up the power of 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And to start off, 3 was the first sacred number, a perfect number, representing the pagan trinity. Yep. Represented geometrically as a triangle and spiritually as the third eye of Hinduism. So you got a couple different things there. Third eye, triangle, and there's also 33 degrees in Masonry.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
What that is,
and was Jesus 33 when he died, or 30?
It was either or.
I should know that.
Yeah,
it's pathetic that I said what. But anyways,
yeah. So there's 33 degrees in Masonry. So what it is Kundalini, or the serpent force, which is directed up the 33 sections of the vertebrae to achieve illumination. So that's why they have 33 degrees, and they're that's it, because it's such a sacred number to them and in general. Next is 6. Which represents the soul of man, and this also represents the omnipotent power of God, as this belief parallels Revelation 13:18, where God assigns the number triplication 666 to both man and the beast. So everyone knows 666, but people think it's the mark of the beast. But God also gave it to man as well. And 6 is also represented by the hexagram, which is, the circle with a 6-pointed star within, touching all the sides.
Right.
And then we get to 7, where it represents the perfected man, or, the perfected man. The biblical number of the mark of Cain. So, and what that is God bestowed onto Cain the mark of Cain, which is represented by 7, which protected him, not in the sense that he couldn't die, but in the sense that if he were to be killed or harmed or whatever, anybody who did so, that would be returned to them. They would be repaid in kind, essentially tenfold. So, yeah, basically eye for an eye. So it was a deterrent, so nobody would touch him. Everyone would leave him alone, which is... I guess can also be attributed, from what I read, to the whole lucky number 7. I'm protected. I got good luck. Nothing can stop me. Because it can also mean perfection, protection, and blessing. So 7, that's a blessing. Gambling.
Yeah, lucky 7.
And then we move on to 11, which is from what I could tell, was the most important number, because that number multiplied by any of the original sacred numbers, 3, 6, 9, 11 itself, or 13, creates that doubling or that tripling of the number. So it's specifically important because of what I just said, multiplied by the other numbers, it creates the multiples. It is called the master number because 10 represents God. So God is represented as the number 10, and then 11 is considered the master number because it's one step above God, which I think you kind of pointed something out like that, like something very similar to that, where it's like each number is like a step up, and then that makes it greater.
Yeah. When I was quoting Sir Low, talking about like two coming from one,
exactly,
which gives birth to 3. Yeah, I mean, it might be slightly different because I don't know.
No, it's definitely
well,
different.
That's the thing with the numbers, too, is because, like, it's different in Kabbalah and in Tarot and in the occult and in alchemy and then in Christianity. You know what I mean? Like, there's some overlapping where, like, some of these numbers have an internal sort of built-in thing, like Trinity throughout has a certain importance to it, one with unity, but then also the fact that 2 comes out of 1, you know.
3 comes out of 2.
Yeah,
so
but still, like, that progression because... Like, even for instance, if you watch, like, David Lynch stuff, he's always talking about, like, the number 10 means perfection or completion. But even there's interpretations of 7 being the number of completion, and 7, which is also, funnily enough, David Lynch's favorite number is number 7. But, and then but then it gets different, too, because 5 is often associated with protection in certain traditions, but it's also associated with man. And then there's a whole Jewish... sequence of numbers that I heard about on a podcast, that Florian Geyer's podcast. In one of the episodes, like Raphael Johnson was talking about the numbers, how they're seen through there, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 is like death. So because it's like a square, like
well, I was reading my notes. I was seeing.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I was following along. I was trying to see. Yeah, because
and I'm not trying to throw a rock. I'm just trying to make it clear that like we're not saying like here's what 7 means and that's what it means. Like I told you from like my sort of alchemical, then reaching into how, because Evel is always making reference to like the Upanishads, Buddhism, Christianity, Catholicism. So like I mean, I feel like if I'm doing my alchemy thing, I can reach out a little bit and say, well, here's how it comes through in the Bible, like for certain similar things. You know what I mean? So I just want no listener to be confused that I'm thinking like I understand what the number 7 means everywhere.
Well, and that's exactly what. That's why I said numbers in the occult, because you said there's so this is just in the occult. This isn't like this is what it means in every single religion or know belief or so on and so forth. So
sorry about that digression.
No, anyways, we digress back to 11. So 10 is considered God, and then 11 is the master number because that's one step above God, quote unquote. And it can mean sin, transgression, or peril. Those words are attached to 11. So not necessarily it's the master number, but it's got bad connotations to it. And then moving right along to number 13, which people think is the bad number. But in all reality, it is a sacred... It can be represented... 13 was used to create... 13 circles, geometric 13 circles, the flower of life. So, which is just a placement of specific 13 circles. It represents death and rebirth, as well as rebellion against God's authority. So, was not intended to be used by the profane. So, there was a small group of people who I do believe were Jewish, because I didn't write down the quote. But the quote was, it was not supposed to be used by the profane, hence the superstition surrounding it. And the quote said, that is our number, not yours, Goyim.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they created this superstition around it that 13 was bad, so people would stay away from it, so people who were not supposed to be using it would not. So that's why everyone's like, oh, 13. But in reality, it's like...
That's funny.
Yeah, it's good. It's real good. Believe it or not.
It's the best number.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, along with 11, those two are right up there. And then, these are in no specific order either. Just going on to number 9. It's sacred because it's the cube of 3, which is the first perfect number. So you do the triplification of, 3, 3, 3, 9, 9, 9. And then it can be inverted into 6, 6, 6, which is also another sacred number. Again, the mark of man and the beast. So that's as simple as that. 9 because 3 times 3 is 9, and it's as simple as that. And then going on to 5, which isn't a sacred number. By the way, I forgot to mention that 7 and 5 are not sacred numbers, though they do have their meanings. 5 represents female energy, largely due to there being 5 days in a woman's fertility cycle, quote unquote. It is represented by the pentagram. Everyone knows the pentagram, don't need to explain that. And it also has Isis, the goddess Isis, attached to it, as well as divine proportion. And that's as simple as that, because everyone knows the pentagram. And then also, this is going to be maybe a different thing on my end, but numbers are also connected to each letter of the alphabet. So, for example, 1 is A, 2 is B, so on and so forth. And that can mean something. I don't know if that's something on your end that might come up, like letters at all.
I mean, in tarot and Kabbalah, like there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, so like each number has a Hebrew letter. 1 to 22 has a Hebrew letter attached to it, like for various things. But like that's the closest that I have seen anything to like what you're talking about, at least in what I look at. That's all.
Yeah, on my end, I didn't delve too deep into it because that's probably a whole other thing. But there's a chart with numbers connected to these letters. So that's pretty much it. And then in these, like for example, like the Masonry meetings and all of these things, there might be certain numbers of things, but it's not just completely like as you said at the beginning, like it's not just 3 candles because whatever. It represents, these sacred numbers. And that goes for any of them. So it's channeling their beliefs through specific numbers of things, items, physical items that you can hold. And, that's why people think, like, for example, like there's pentagrams, hexagrams, you'll see that everywhere. And it's just kind of interesting how a lot of these things that you see are just, people think that it's pointless or there's no meaning to it. Numbers have a big, role in that. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and yeah, like what came through in my thing too is it's more than just a thing to represent quantity. That's there's something in the idea of that number.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, well, this that's about it, really. Yeah, that's all I got on that.
Okay. Well, yes. Sorry, this one. I know it probably wasn't terribly exciting as an episode, but we just felt we needed to sort of talk about numbers a little bit. We've put this one off a little bit, so we just figured we'd get it done. And what did we have in mind for next? I think. Well, we could talk about that on our own because I don't want to say something like we're going to do this next and not fail to keep the promise. But yeah, we will be here in another 2 weeks. Because we switched to bi-weekly now, just to sort of do some more research and stuff. So, yeah. Oh, I just have one more interesting 7 I came across, just very, like, coincidentally, and looking through this. So, since, France has a rich Hermetic tradition going back for a long time. It's like there's Hermetic alchemical stuff on all their cathedrals, and there's a lot of French writers and works that are, dealing with this stuff. So, this one isn't, but just as that's the connection. In George Stendhal's book on love, he has, when one falls in love, the soul goes through a 7-stage process. And it is 1, admiration. 2, the physical, imagining contact with the beloved. 3, hope, in which you observe all the perfections of your beloved. 4, the birth of love. 5, the first crystallization. 6, reservations, which is when doubt begins to creep in. And 7 is the second crystallization, and you're in love. You can look up more about that. It's in George Stendhal on love, and all that is detailed in like the first 2 chapters, and they're pretty short too. So just interesting stuff. All right.
Yeah, that about wraps it up for numbers. So we will definitely be back within 2 weeks with something else that will be episode 11. But that being said, this was episode 10 on numbers. I'm Dan Rasanowski.
I'm Joe Schaefer.
And thanks again for tuning in. You guys take care.
Bye. សាញ់ស្រឡាញ់សែនស្រឡាញ់សាញ់ស្រឡាញ់សាញ់ស្រឡាញ់